Greetings and salutations, this is Imperator Vespasian and his trusty sidekick.
Hello!
We have a group of new tanks, KV1 tanks. These are Soviet tanks from the early part of the Second World War. The Soviets actually began with KV tanks, the heaviest, most powerful tank on the battlefield for pretty much half the war, first half of the war. In fact, they were still pretty tough by the end of the war as well. They were still in service, so they sort of saw the war through. You've already seen a video we've done on our Finnish version of this tank. This is the Russian version. So the KV1 was built to replace the larger T-35, T-28s. T-28s? Yeah, T-28s.
T-26s are the good ones.
Yeah, the land battleships, the large, massively powerful, powerful for the time tanks with multiple turrets.
A moving fortress.
Yeah. Given that anti-tank guns were in the infancy at the time, they were a lot more powerful and less laughable as gamers seemed to treat them. A lot of people seem to make fun of the Soviet tanks of the time, and indeed the British tank.
Well, you won't laugh at it if you start in real life.
Yeah, the British also had multi-turreted tanks, which worked okay. It's just then really bad suspension, so they tended to break down. The Russians solved the suspension problem by sticking way more wheels on them, and not worrying about suspension at all. So poor drivers. The KV1 was supposed to have replaced all the T-28s and T-26s, T-35s and T-26s. In reality, because of the during the Finnish War, there weren't enough KVs to go around, so they were still using the T-28s. And also, by the time that Germany went to war with Russia, they had not managed to replace the KVs. So they were few and far between. You would be lucky to see one or two tanks on their own. They weren't organised into large units at the point of Barbarossa, and that is partly due to their deployment. They tended to be rushed into battle by their crews, and then they would get separated, and they never really reorganised until the biggest tank battle ever, which was
Bulge. Bulge.
That wasn't a big tank battle now. Not Crimea. Sorry, not Kursk. That wasn't the biggest battle. Suma.
I heard of it.
Was it? I think it was something like that. Anyway, I don't care. Anyway, who cares? There was a point during Barbarossa where the Germans had pushed on. They were pushing the Russians forward and pushing the Russians back, and the Russians massed all of their tanks, every single tank they could get their hands on. They had thousands of them, and they mass attacked the Germans with all their tank units, and that's where the KVs managed to actually get into fighting units. It didn't really help them. The Germans won.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, come on.
Yeah, the Germans weren't playing heavy tank tactics. The Germans ran rings around the Russians, around the Soviets, and the Russian tank armies were destroyed.
Or you just keep the Germans basically just run around them and wait for the tanks to break down, then kill the crews.
Yeah, German doctrine was to attack fuel trucks. You take out the fuel trucks, wait a few days, the tanks don't move anymore.
Yep.
Tanks work on fuel and ammunition, and food for the crew.
What fuel do they use?
Diesel.
I thought it would be diesel. It's more powerful and lasts longer.
Yeah, Germans use petrol, which is why
That's because they're desperate.
Yeah, it's why the anti-tank dogs didn't work.
Yeah, petrol we know with our cars, it runs out fast.
Yeah, we've got a diesel car at the moment, and it lasts a lot longer for long haul driving. Works a lot longer. But anyway, the Russians had these dogs with bombs on the back, and they sent the dogs in, and the dogs were trained to run underneath tanks. Unfortunately, they trained the dogs on Russian tanks, and the dogs didn't recognise the German tanks because they smelt funny.
Yeah.
So they all, as soon as they released the dogs, the Russian tank crew were machine gunning the dogs because the dogs were trying to run underneath the Russian tanks, and blew up quite a few Russian tanks. So it was a complete waste of time and effort, really. And it shows how stupid dogs are.
Well, no, actually, that's what they're taught to do.
Yeah, no, they were, yeah.
They're taught to go under Russian tanks.
Yeah, I'll run underneath the Russian tank. Why would I want to run under a German tank? I've not been trained for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say apologies to all the dog lovers, but hey, these are communists that did this, so can't blame me. Yeah, so the KV was I think it was called a deep penetration tank or something, or a deep war tank. I can't remember its name. The idea is Soviet tactics would be you would first send in a human wave attack, just the fastest troops swamping forwards. If that didn't work, you sent in a large contingent of light tanks. This is why it didn't do well. Yeah, you send in a large contingent of light tanks. I mean, by large, more tanks than your own army has. The Soviets have loads.
Why don't you just send in your best of the best first, and then no, send in your really bad troops just to distract the Germans for a bit, and then get your real good troops and just run around the Germans and hit them from behind.
Because the Soviets had no trained officers, so they couldn't do advanced infantry tactics.
That's not advanced, that's just basics.
No, literally marching forward is about all the Soviet army was capable of doing. They had no officers at all.
That's because Stalin shot them all.
Yeah, Stalin executed them all.
What about Zhukov? I know he was really good.
He was in Japan at the time, he was in China. Right.
I thought Zhukov took Berlin.
Yeah, that was like 4 years later.
Oh.
So, you had, so the light tanks go in en masse, the tank attack. If that doesn't work, you then send in the heavy tanks. That's where your KVs are supposed to come in. Unfortunately, the Soviets used a lot more T-28s than KVs. They're not the best tanks in the world. These tactics actually worked. They worked in Poland, they worked in Lithuania, they worked in Estonia, Latvia, pick your number. They worked in China, Manchuria, not Manchuria, Mongols. Where did Mongols live?
Mongolia.
Well done. They worked in Mongolia. The Soviet tactics work because you have too many men for the enemy to actually deal with. And by the time the heavy tanks come on, you've used up all your anti-tank rounds anyway. You've used all your machine gun ammunition up, shooting at infantry. And eventually the Soviets will break through and carry on advancing. It doesn't work in defence. The Soviets had no concept of deep defence. Their defence, they simply didn't have the sort of soldiers who could do it. The officers, they literally just ordered troops into the front or just stand and die. By the time the Germans
shot by your own soldier.
Oh yeah, but by the time the Germans reached the gates of Moscow, the Soviets had all the Soviet army hadn't retreated in front of the Germans. A lot of people seem to think the Soviets were pushed back by the Germans. They weren't. They were killed. They were annihilated. The troops who defended Moscow.
If you ran, you would be shot for treason.
Yes. Yeah, and you had nowhere to go to. There was no way to
the British army and every other army.
Yeah.
If you run away from your rank, your designated point, you get shot for treason.
Yeah, and you had a chit for each battalion. And if you needed fuel, then you had to take your chit to the battalion fuel depot and you had to take the fuel cans assigned to your battalion. You couldn't take someone else's fuel cans.
What happens if someone else, other someone
It
else,
doesn't matter.
has lost? Are all dead?
The Germans captured massive amounts of fuel and ammunition that were just never used because they wouldn't give it to the tank crews.
That's stupid.
It's communism. Seriously,
They
the
could have won.
system
They could have
was insane.
Zhukov wouldn't even would still be in Japan.
Yeah,
right?
the Russians
and
could have.
Berlin would have fallen.
Yeah, the Russians could have bet the Germans on the day of Barbarossa. Basically, yeah, they had the men. They could have done it. But seriously, you would have units that did try to retreat. They had no depot. They couldn't get fuel. So they had to just sit in their tanks.
They had a depot, but
Yeah,
it wasn't their designated fuel.
Exactly. And so they would just sit on a road with no fuel and just fire at the Germans until they ran out of ammunition and died. Seriously, they had no choice.
See, if you had capitalism, right, everyone would have whatever fuel you wanted.
Or you could just hold a gun to the dude's head and say, right, give me the damn fuel.
You think that's what they would do, to be completely honest?
Just think, British Army at Isandlwana. Well, they're famous for.
I know.
They wouldn't give ammunition to the wrong battalions. When they were fighting the Zulus.
Oh, yeah.
The reason the British were defeated by the Zulus was because the quartermasters wouldn't issue ammunition.
They only beat at the beginning.
Yeah, at the beginning, yeah. But pretty soon they worked out they were in trouble and started just smashing boxes open.
The general, one of the officers stood on top of all the carriages and just shot. And so he ran out of ammo and went, oh, screw it.
Durnford.
And they
Yeah.
got shot and fell down a crevasse.
Yeah, I love that film.
And the general was writing a letter at the time.
Yeah, killed in his tent.
Writing a letter.
Body was found in
He
his
didn't finish it.
Yeah. So anyway, it's great having the most powerful tank in the world. It's not great having the stupidest government in the world and the stupidest army. And it's not really the men's fault. They were junior officers who were suddenly made into high-ranking officers overnight. And
It's something you'd think they'd be able to do, though. Well,
you've got junior officers, and suddenly your colonel and
Tell me
your
that-
major and your general
So
have
you-
been shot,
right.
and you get given a general's uniform and told you're a general now.
Yeah, but you're telling me that a junior officer doesn't know the basics.
He's only trained to deal with the smaller unit.
But I have no training and I know how to use an army.
Yeah, but you've read a lot. You know a lot about military stuff. You know a lot about history. If you know a lot about history, you can often work out what's going to happen next anyway. It's quite
Especially
easy.
if you see what your enemy's got.
And especially if you know what the enemy's doing, which the Soviets certainly knew. But unfortunately, there were a lot of very junior officers who were very quickly promoted. They were paranoid as hell because at any moment they could be denounced as not a true communist and shot themselves. So they dared not follow orders. They daren't use their own initiative and punch the guy with the fuel truck and say, right, we're taking
who would
the
know?
fuel. You'd be reported. Well, for a start,
You
there's a
already know the
commissar
Germans
who would shoot you.
The Germans are coming over the border. God, just put a bullet through his head. They think the Germans did it.
Some commissars went rogue, and they led their troops and disobeyed orders, and got their troops out of battle in order to fight again. And they made their way to Pripyat marshes. Massive amounts of Soviet troops went into the Pripyat marshes, and they fought the Germans throughout the war. It's in German-occupied territory.
Well, the country's gone back to Russia. They would have
And
killed
when
them.
when the Soviets retook the territory, they executed them all for not following orders.
Yeah.
So that's what you get for helping fight your enemy.
It says the people that took Berlin.
Yeah,
They're
the
all
troops
shot.
who took Berlin were executed.
Although they deserved it, though. What they did.
Yeah, but what do you expect them to do?
You don't,
A
you
dog
don't, you
will
don't do that. You-
A dog will do
If I-
on your lawn.
If we decide to take over a city, a capital city, we wouldn't do that kind of stuff.
No,
It's not right.
Stalin deliberately sent those troops in because
I
he
know he
wanted to
did.
punish the Germans. He wanted them to know they'd
This is
lost.
what he took when after the Potsdam and Yalta and
Yeah.
all them conferences. That's why on the east side of Germany, it was completely ruined. They wouldn't give them money, they wouldn't let them have food, they didn't care about them. But on the west side, they had a new currency, they were given millions of pounds to build everything up again.
Oh, they were getting a bit, yeah. But
Which is why Stalin did the Berlin blockade. He didn't want he wants to be aggressive, but he didn't want anyone to get killed.
yeah, he didn't want to start a war because he'd run out of
He
men.
didn't have the nuclear bomb.
I don't think the bomb bothered him that much. To be honest, if you read
I think he
stuff
was
at the
thinking
time.
more about Moscow, I think.
Yeah, it was. Even with you'd need a lot of nuclear bombs to fight Russia. A
No,
lot of
because
nuclear bombs.
they already
And we
lost the
couldn't
army.
produce them that quickly at the time. The Soviets had no army.
Hey, how did the Soviets know that?
Well, the Soviets didn't, but the Soviets knew exactly how many bombs we had. They also knew how long it took to make them, because British intelligence was run by Soviet spies. American intelligence and American government had
What about
lots of
German-
Soviet spies
German-
in
It
it.
was German spies, wasn't it?
The American ones actually were originally German spies who ended up working for the Russians because of the change of government. So the Russians knew pretty much what everything the Americans were doing. They didn't know entirely the deployment, but they knew that if it came to a war, the Americans could possibly beat them. So Stalin wasn't really willing to risk.
And it would have been the entire Europe. Europe would have completely gone all out against the Russians.
Well, I wasn't worried about Europe. Europe wasn't in a fit state to fight the Russians. France didn't. The only country in Europe that had an army at the time was Britain.
I know.
And our army was
Oh no,
shattered.
Sweden had an army. They didn't
Yeah, I
use
won't
it.
worry about Swedes.
They didn't
The
use it.
Swedish army is only a problem if you invade Finland. But seriously, the only army in existence in Europe at the end of the Second World War was the British Army, and the British Army was out of men. Your grandfather, grandfather, he was an engineer, and he.
Yeah, no, he was told to pick up a pistol and fight.
Sorry, yeah, it's your great grandfather that I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah, that was in Indonesia. Your great grandfather, he was an engineer, tank engineer. He fixed tanks,
I know.
and by the end of the war, he was manning a gun in a tank
Yeah.
because they'd run out of crew. They had no. Britain had no crew. We'd run out of men.
Hey, we won.
Yeah, we won simply by owning all the real estate. That's how we won. We held the land. And the Russians took the rest of it.
See, we should have chose wisely during World War II. There's two people fighting each other. Extreme fascism versus extreme communism. We should have picked wisely who we were going to attack first.
You mean a socialist state against another socialist state?
National
So I'm gonna-
socialists
Socialist, yeah.
versus very extreme communism.
Yeah, and guess what? Their enemies were capitalism. And guess who won? The capitalists.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, we did. We defeated the Germans, and we ended up beating the Russians in the end.
We didn't do anything against the Russians.
Yeah, we did absolutely nothing, and the Russians eventually ate themselves and collapsed.
Yes.
Because we were like a non-communist
Well,
country.
they can't blame Russia for that. It was the
Oh,
Soviet Union. Soviet Union was a horrible
Yeah, the
place.
Soviet Union was awful, but it wasn't really awful due to bad men. They were bad men, but a lot of it was down to stupid people. When the communists took over, have you heard of the kulaks?
Everyone's heard of the gulags.
No, the kulaks.
No.
The kulaks were the landowners, the people who owned all the farms. When the Bolsheviks took over, the peasants ran over and murdered all the kulaks, the farmers. Right? Guess what happened?
What?
6 million people starved to death.
Oh yeah, I know, but yeah.
That's not the government doing that. That isn't the government. That's government incompetence for not intervening. That's just communism. That's just what it does. What happened with the food? The massive starvation in China.
Was there starvation in China?
Yeah, like 10 million people died.
Mao.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he adopted the Russian idea of playing music to the plants.
Yeah, that didn't work out, did it?
Oh, what was the guy's name? Lysenko. They came up with this idea that if you play patriotic, because plants are communists apparently.
Yeah, I know. And if you play patriotic music, the plants will be happy and want to flower.
Yeah, the plants will feel patriotic because apparently plants are communist and they like communist music. And
so, to be fair,
so they took all the farmers out of the fields, all the workers out of the fields, and put them in factories, and they just had trucks driving around playing patriotic music, and 10 million people starved to death. About 10 million, that's off the top of my head, I can't remember. Whenever you talk about communism, there's always like millions of deads, and it's just had stacking the numbers.
But Hitler was the bad man, right? Stalin was a good man.
Yeah, well, Churchill was a bad man too.
Churchill didn't kill millions of his own people.
I mean, God, in the Empire days, when Churchill was minister of war or something, he was in charge of Arabia at the time, and a load of Arabs decided they didn't want to pay taxes anymore. So Churchill gassed the towns that didn't pay taxes. And all the other towns decided to pay taxes.
That's how I deal with it.
Yeah, it's just that's Churchill. This is the guy Britain holds up as this amazing paragon of Britain.
We would have lost World War II if we were at him.
Yeah, because you need a psychopath to fight psychopaths.
Yeah.
You need a psychopath in charge. You need that. This is just the world we're living. Anyway, the KV itself, back to the actual video. Sorry, we've really gone off on one today. The KVs are scratch built out of card. I should have done a video on that, shouldn't we? If you lift them up, they're just card underneath. Honest, just card, nothing else. And they're basically part of our new Soviet army. We're slightly modernising the Soviets. We originally started off with a Soviet army for fighting against the Japanese. So a really early war, pre-war actually, army. And now we're building new stuff to upgrade the army to fight in Finland. And then eventually we'll be fighting Barbarossa.
Yay.
Because it's early war, and we like early war, we don't like late war, do we?
No, we hate it.
Yeah, it's boring.
Yeah.
Don't like it. It's rubbish. So that's it. Right. Anything to add?
Plus, early war is all politics.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
So if you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe, and comment down below what you think of the Russian KV. That's everything from me.
And everything from him. Goodbye.
See ya.